Talking with the experts.
Because I've worked with clients who have been all over the board in this regard. There is some value in a guest preparing suggested questions that could guide the conversation in a direction that makes sense for how they serve and how they want to be known. However, a guest should be eminently flexible to bend and sway in the direction that the conversation is naturally flowing. And that means that you have to learn how to bend and sway. And I remember hearing this story one time, podcast interviews are interviews, they're conversations. That means that both sides are going to have something to say. And there are some guests who think it's supposed to be a monologue. And the host can't get a word in edgewise. Has that ever happened to you, Rose?
Talking with the experts.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. My name's Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com, and Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners. And you can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And I would love it if you would subscribe to my YouTube channel and, ding the bell so you find out when I'm uploading new videos. And I thank you in advance for doing that. Today my guest is Nancy Dutton. And
Dutton.
That's correct. Oh, excellent. And she is known as the everything lady. And we're going to be talking about how to be the podcast dream guests that top hosts can't wait to book. And her business is get known, get paid. Sorry, my tongue's not even working this morning. And a little bit about Nancy is she transforms speakers, experts, and authors into sought-after podcast guests who speak their way to six figures and beyond. And she combines her years of public relations agency success, proven online marketing strategies honed since 2009, and velvet boot of accountability to kick clients into an empowering and sustainable gear of performance and profits. Welcome, Nancy. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, Rose. It's good to be here.
Yeah, we were having a bit of a discussion before we started this morning about what your groups and your subscriber list is like. And I was like, oh, wow, if I could get to that, I would be in seventh heaven, I think. So tell me a little bit about what it is that you actually do for or with your clients.
Well, my clients tend to be successful service providers who want to book themselves on the right podcasts so that they can accelerate their lead flow and welcome more inbound sales inquiries without leaving their house and without hiring an expensive booking agency. So I take these clients who are fiscally responsible and I empower them with the knowledge, the know-how, the skills, the finesse, and the moxie to ask for and get booked on the shows that are right for their message so they can ultimately smile all the way to the bank.
Oh, wow, that's encouraging. So you'd have to send a few more my way now.
Say that one more time.
So you'll have to send a few more my way. This is the perfect podcast for that.
Yes, and you know what? I would love to, because that I actually have quite a community of people that I would love to introduce you to.
Perfect. We could make a bargain. Anyway, Nancy, so tell me, what does make the ideal dream host?
The ideal dream guest.
No, host. What makes the ideal dream host?
Oh, the ideal dream host. An ideal dream host is one who establishes excellent rapport with their guest, sets up the guest to deliver quality content that is of service and of interest to the host and the audience that they've worked so hard to build. It's an ideal host is someone who recognizes unique and distinct points of view and allows people to express them, and sets up the conversation so that everyone who's listening, regardless of the quantity, is better off for having invested that time in that episode.
Sounds like me. There we go. Geez, I sound vain, don't I? There you go. So what makes the ideal dream guest then?
Well, the ideal dream guest is someone who cares as much about the host and the host's audience as he or she cares about him or herself. The ideal dream guest is ready to go to the show at the appointed time and is never late. The ideal guest not only shows up prepared and ready to have a great conversation, but the ideal guest also will have listened to the show before getting to the show to understand the vibe, the tribe, and the purpose, so that there's a right audience to message match. I think one of the best ways that you can be a brilliant guest is what you do after the show. Because if you are fortunate to be invited to be a guest on a show like this that has over 10,000 app downloads, the best thing that you can do for your host is to merchandise that episode to everyone you know. Social media, your opt-in list, your Facebook group, post it to your online press room, because what it is that the host wants is more downloads, more 5-star reviews, more subscribers, and more relationships with people who care about the exchange of value between the parties. It's not just hit it and quit it and get on with it. I tell people, nobody likes a one-night stand. What if you started a conversation with a host and it turned it into a lasting relationship where not only did you really develop keen appreciation and respect for each other, but you felt compelled to introduce her to amazing guests that could add value to the program, and perhaps the host knew of other podcast hosts that could benefit from your content. One good thing always leads to another, so be arms wide open to show up in that way and see what magic can unfold.
Oh, I agree. Thank you for sharing that. That's brilliant, honestly. Do you find that sometimes guests are booked onto a podcast and they're not really interested in the podcast itself? They're just trying to get their, try to sell their product or service or whatever it is, and they have no interest in they're not rude, but they're standoffish.
I will tell you that as a publicist working for big name clients over many decades, that happens a fair amount. Guests just want to schlep their book, if you will. And when you buy my book, and when you buy my widget, when you go to my website, guests need to remember that the podcast host should be interested in what it is that you're offering and shouldn't be wanting to have a conversation about it. It isn't about you getting to sell your stuff on that show. It's about you having a provocative, compelling, juicy of service conversation that will stand on its own, whether or not someone buys your goodie or not. And I'll never forget, years ago when I was working in news media, there was an anchor of a major television station here in the States. And she said, "I really hate it when people say to me, I never watch the news, but you should write or cover what it is that I am doing." It's so insulting to say to someone who lives and dies on a deadline that I don't have the courtesy to pay attention to your show, but you should turn the camera on me. That is like the kiss of death for anybody who's in a position of influence. You can either be welcomed in, arms wide open, or you can have this thing here, this finger that I'm pointing. This is the ultimate arbiter. It is the thing that has the power over the delete key. I always say to my clients, be that host's favorite. Be the be the guest, be the client, be the human being that you most want to attract, which means it's not just about you, it's what you can make happen in conversation so that everyone who's tuning in is made better off. It's not just about your book or your widget. It's about the conversation you want to be a part of, the mission you want to fight for, and the stories that you tell that make the audience better off.
Yeah, I agree. It is like that. I mean, I try to run this podcast so that guests aren't sent, preordained questions or they've sent me questions that I'm permitted to ask them. I think I like this to be more like a coffee chat so that we're getting to know each other and the audience can feel relaxed, like they can sit in their lounge or they can sit at the cafe or whatever they're doing, having their coffee and feel like they are part of the podcast and they're being included because it's not structured and it doesn't sound fake. It doesn't sound like an acting role. Yeah, rehearsed. Yeah, I know that a lot of my guests love the fact that I don't send pre-organized questions and we just have a chat because you never know where the podcast is going to lead, despite the fact that they've sent me a reason that they want to be on here and they've given me a title like you have. But sometimes we go way out of that sort of thing because we find something that is interesting for both of us, I guess. And
Yes.
I love the way conversations with my guests go. But as you say, and I said before that some people just don't really, they have no interest and they're just standoffish and not very pleasant to interview because it's really hard to drag stuff out of them.
So here's what I have to say about that, because I've worked with clients who have been all over the board in this regard. There is some value in a guest preparing suggested questions that could guide the conversation in a direction that makes sense for how they serve and how they want to be known. However, a guest should be eminently flexible to bend and sway in the direction that the conversation is naturally flowing. And that means that you have to learn how to bend and sway. And I remember hearing this story one time, podcast interviews are interviews, they're conversations. That means that both sides are going to have something to say. And there are some guests who think it's supposed to be a monologue. And the host can't get a word in edgewise. Has that ever happened to you, Rose?
It has. I have had some guests who are very, I haven't been able to ask a question. It's just been total, but it's been engaging because they have actually, answered the topic, I guess, but it's just been continuous and I haven't really had much input into it, but hey, it makes my job easier. I don't have to think of anything.
Well, I remember hearing this story about this one podcast host and his producer were in a studio and they had the guest come in and the guest started talking and she kept talking and she kept talking and there was no pause and they knew that this was going to continue. So both the host and the producer got up and went to the water cooler and poured some coffee, came back to the microphone. The guest was still talking.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
And what I would say to that is don't be that guest. It's a conversation. It's a dialogue. It's not a monologue.
Oh my goodness. That's talk with a mouthful of marbles underwater. That's terrible. Oh yeah, I took a month off from doing my podcast. I took all of July off this year because I was getting podcast burnout. I was like booking people 5 days a week and I was getting 3 and 4 interviews a day and trying to run my business plus do the podcast was like I was going to bed like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, then I'd have interviews straight away at 11. So I wasn't getting a lot of sleep and my husband was complaining because I wasn't spending any time with him whatsoever. So I've cut it down to 2 days a week and 3 guests a day. So that's 6 guests a week, which is still a lot by podcast standards. But I try to still be present with each guest, because I think that they're giving up their time to be here. So I'm obliged as a host to be present for them. Whether I like their conversation or I don't, I still try to pretend that I'm interested.
Well, so since you brought up this podcast burnout, and you are a host of an influential show, Talking with Experts podcast with Rose Davidson. So as someone who has reached a level of success, what contributed to your burnout? And are there lessons that guests can learn from that experience that will help you attract even better guests so that you can continue to enjoy hosting the show?
I think it was just the fact that it was just monotony. It became monotonous. And then by the time because I do everything, I do all the editing and everything. And so, you spend a half hour, 45 minutes with somebody, and then, sometimes you have back-to-back interviews, and then, and then you think you've got a backlog of, 6 or 8 interviews that you have to edit. And I think, oh, do I really want to do this now? And you think, no. And then sometimes I get to the point where, do I really want to talk to this person? I mean, and most of the time they are really engaging, guests. However, I don't think my face is actually showing that I'm really present with them. And I don't think that it's fair that I am not present with them, because, as I said, they've given up their valuable time to be with me. So it is my obligation as a host to be present and show some interest in what they have to say. So, yeah, and getting the burnout, I think, is just, you need to take the space. You need to not do so many interviews in a day. And I think getting someone, you need to outsource some of the stuff. I still haven't got the point where I want to lose control of all that yet. So,
Well, it's useful to hear your perspective. My whole approach, I did another podcast interview today with someone of great influence. And I thought to myself, I'm going to be there before he's going to be there. I'm going to be camera ready, because he said, be sure to be camera ready. I'm going to have listened to at least 3 of his shows to understand the format and any curves that can roll my way. And I'm going to smile and be happy to be there. And when it was complete and the microphone went silent, he asked me this one question. He said, what is the one question I should have asked that I didn't ask? And I said, the question you should have asked that I'd love for you to ask is, what happens when the microphone goes silent, and why does that matter most of all? And he said, well, that's a good one. Let's answer that question. And I said, if you've truly had an awesome conversation with the host and the rapport was there, and the conversation unfolded in a way that really was of service and made the host laugh and made the guest feel seen and heard, chances are when the microphone goes silent, you're both going to be so in love with each other that you won't be able to stop yourselves from exploring what next can happen for both of you if you could just put your heads together and co-create something even more amazing. And I think in my journey as a podcast guest, that has been the most magical part of it for me. And let's just face facts. I know we were talking about this before. When the COVID-19 pandemic hit last March, there were an awful lot of businesses that came to a halt very quickly. But the cool thing about podcast guesting is we can all speak up on more of the right shows without leaving our house or wearing a mask or worrying about a vaccine. And if you double down on that strategy, you can touch and transform lives all around the world with your stories, with your message, with your how-to guidance. And I find that so empowering. And now that the Delta variant is becoming more of a factor, I think there's going to be even more need for people to speak up and share their message wherever they are. And I just see huge opportunity to raise the bar for guests everywhere so that hosts have even better choices of people who are prepared, who are delightful, who have good stories to share, who have value to bring. So that's really the flag I'm waving.
Yeah, very good. I've actually got a clear envelope with all the podcast guests that I've had a really great time with, and I keep them in there, and I've stacked them up so I can invite them back again. And it's good that that there are people that I do want to invite back again, because they've been so delightful and I've had so much fun. It's not really like a job. It's a conversation. I'm having so much fun, and sometimes you just don't even want the podcast to end because you're just going on and on and on and on and having such a great time.
Well, and isn't that what we all want? I mean, there are all kinds of ways to grow your business in the year 2021. There's a different guru on every corner saying, if you build your funnel this way, if you speak on stages, if you do a 3-day event, if you do this, if you do that, if you build some complicated funnel, there's going to be a flavor of the month of a different way to grow your business that can be very fruitful and lucrative. But here's the thing. If the plan that's being laid out is something that's not in your wheelhouse, that doesn't feel like fun, that you don't want to do, energetically, I think you bring that negative baggage to whatever the tactic. And what I love about podcast guesting is that if you are a speaker and someone who puts words together well and knows how to have a conversation as a human being with another human being, it's like the most natural thing in the world to show up as the expert that you are. And the beauty of it is that anyone who's listening will have that experience too. And in a long form conversation, you learn enough about someone's point of view and their sense of humor and the way they turn a phrase and whether or not you got value. You as a listener are thinking, gosh, I've heard a lot of people talk about this, but not in this way. I think I want to learn more from that person. And then when people get in touch with you, they're pre-sold that you're their person because they already spent half an hour with you on the Talking with Experts podcast with Rose Davidson.
You're a sweetheart. I think I'm in love with you.
Well, thank you. That's so kind. I'm enjoying myself with you as well.
So, Nancy, have you written any books?
Yes, I have.
Please tell.
I am the author of the Bye Bye Boring Bio workbook that helps you attract more clients, connections, leads, and cash as a speaker, expert, and author up to big things. And what's really powerful about my workbook is, I'll be honest, I wrote the first edition 10 years ago. I wrote the second edition the year after that. And then I rode that horse for a good long time, and I got very well known as the business bio expert. I rode that horse until that horse didn't want to hunt anymore. And then what happened is the pandemic happened. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you or any author but sometimes you pick up the book you wrote 9 years ago and you read it with fresh eyes and you ask yourself, is this the best I can do in service to my audience today? Or should I do it over? So when the pandemic happened, I decided to redo the Bye Bye Boring Bio workbook so that it would be of service to virtual speakers and podcast guests from coast to coast and around the world, and became an Amazon #1 bestseller in a heartbeat. And now it's a foundational element of all of the programs that I lead, because what's different about it is that not only helps you get all your bios done and dialed for every application, but there's a whole section on podcast guest ninja strategies to help open doors for you with a bio that sets you apart from the rest. And there's even videos and audios within the workbook, so the content can come alive no matter your favorite learning style.
Wow, that's incredible. So it's still
you.
Available on Amazon. So what
Yes,
is the
as a
title
matter of
again?
fact-
Yeah, please do show it.
Here it is.
Ah, yay. Okay, people, you've got to buy that book.
Well, and what was so much fun is there's pages and pages of testimonials from people with really big names in the world today. And one gentleman, Christopher Flett, the CEO of Ghost CEO, did a beautiful YouTube video, and he has like over 100 coaches that work under his banner, working with business leaders across the nation. And he said of all the business tools he evaluated in 2020, the Bye Bye Boring Bio got his vote as his favorite because of how complete, how relatable, how practical, and how powerful it was. And so it's just really wonderful that in the darkest hour of our world, where everybody's wearing a mask and holding on for dear life, that I could create something that would earn such praise, become an Amazon #1 bestseller, and also ease a pain that a lot of people struggle with. And I just have to ask you, have you been presented with boring bios that are hard to read, that add nothing to the conversation? And have you had other bios that were so much better and so much more fun? I think we could all do a little bit better with our bios.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. They need to be engaging. I have had guest bios where they don't really tell me who the person is, and they tell me what they do, but they don't tell me who they are. And if I'm going to be interviewing people, I want to know who they are.
Well, so one of the stories that I tell on the back of my book, the bio for your back of the book is the thing that might help people actually turn from a browser to a buyer. But I'm a big fan of telling a succinct story that speaks your truth in a way that's memorable. So it says here, an action taker and results maker since she was 9 years old, Nancy wrote a letter to the president of the Tootsie Pop Corporation to reveal how many licks it takes to get to the center. She sent it in after watching a TV commercial featuring an animated owl that asked that question. Weeks later, she got a certificate in the mail from the president of the Tootsie Pop Corporation, and it made her feel important for the very first time. And she's since been using words on paper and online to make others feel important ever since.
Oh, that's great.
But it's one of those things where if you could tell a story that lets people know that this isn't just what you do for a living, it's what you were destined to do from a very early age, people know that it's not just every hour a billable hour. It's she's the one to go to get that problem solved so that I can be memorable, referable, easily found, and easily hired. And I want that for everyone who wants to be doing business today and forever.
Do you want to hold the book up again so people can
sure.
have another look? Terrific. All right, guys, you need to buy this book. It sounds intriguing. I think I might have to go and buy it myself.
I will send you a copy as my gift to you.
Oh, you're a darling. So where can people find you, Nancy?
Well, since we're talking about turning into becoming the podcast dream guest, the top host can't wait to book, the thing I would love for you to run and not walk to go get is the Media One Sheet gift template that will help you position yourself as a host, a guest that a top host can't wait to book. So if you go to www.mediaonesheetnow.com, MEDIAONESHEET now.com, you can download a handy dandy template that within 15 minutes, you can upload your photo, your host friendly bio, your hot media topics, how you want to get booked, and what's special and compelling about you. You can get that done in 20 minutes or less. You will be media ready, media savvy, and ready to go to the show.
Great plug.
Thank you.
Well, our time is now up, Nancy, and it's been an absolute delight speaking with you. I have had an absolutely terrific morning. You've made my day. Yeah, I am definitely in love with you.
Well, so you're way across the world. So when we're done, I'll be sure to get, I will send you a digital copy of the Bye Bye Boring Bio workbook so that you can benefit from it. And I hope that you enjoy it. And I hope that there's more for us to do to support each other. So thank you.
I look forward to receiving it. Thank you so much for your gift. It's lovely. All right. Pleasure. Thanks, Nancy.
Thank you, Rose.
Before we go, any wise words?
Believe and behave as if the most important person is going to call you tomorrow, and rise up to the occasion so that you will be their favorite. So doors will open and you will be seen, heard, celebrated, and most importantly, compensated.
Beautiful. Beautiful. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.